People don't understand that the mental and emotional side can quickly derail any logic that's out there. So you have a farmer that you've been feeding into and giving technical assistance who's of color. They're already walking in the door with the doubts and the negative self-talk, that says, is this really for me? Will this thing work out? What dangers lie ahead that I don't even see coming if I keep doing what I'm doing? Those are things that are going through these farmers' minds that are real things that most people, who don't wear black skin every day of their lives don't understand.
That's P. Wade Ross from the Texas Small Farmers and Ranchers community-based organization. He's the guest on our show today, and he's got some great stories to tell, which we'll hear in just a moment. This is Down to Earth, the Planet to Plate podcast, a co-production of the Radio Cafe and Quivira Coalition. I'm your host, Mary Charlotte Domandi. And before we get to our program, we want to let you know that early bird pricing for the Regenerate Conference will end on August 15th. Complete your registration before then to secure a discounted price. Regenerate will take place November 6th through 8th in Denver, Colorado. This year's conference, Innovating for a Resilient Future, will explore data, technology, information collection and sharing, ways of learning and knowing, and the myriad approaches to fulfilling our ecological roles. Join in this exploration of innovation with leading thinkers and doers. You can go to regenerateconference.com for more information and to sign up. And now to our program. I'm very happy to welcome P. Wade Ross. He's Executive Director of the Texas Small Farmers and Ranchers community-based organization, tsfrcbo.org. He's a soil biologist, and he will be speaking at the Regenerate Conference in November in Denver, Colorado. Welcome to Down to Earth.
Thank you so much for having me here today.
So your parents, W. Wade and Anita Ross, founded this organization in 1998. You're based in Texas. What led them to start the thing in the first place?
Oh, good question. My great-grandfather, Grandpa Jack Ross, actually was he and his five brothers were runaway slaves from South Carolina. And they landed actually in Texas thinking it was, Mexico, learning quite quickly. It wasn't quite Mexico, but they understood it wasn't quite a good look for 6 ex-slaves to be together as young black men. So they split up, never to see each other again. My grandfather, I don't know where he fell in the pecking order as far as age, but he ended up in College Station area of Texas and became the town blacksmith there. And from what we know, he was so good at what he did, they did not want him to leave. Not only did they introduce his wife to him, which is my great-grandmother, Grandma Charity Ross, but they also gave him the opportunity to buy some land, which he did. And unfortunately, when he went to pick up the deed for his land after paying on it for 10 years, they asked him how he knew that he paid for the land. And when he replied, that, hey, I know I can't read and write, but I know how to count. And I've got a tree out back that I notched every payment I made. So they said, well, go show us that tree. And he did. And once he took him out to his place, he showed him the tree, they chopped it down, and they made him start from day one. So he ended up paying for the land twice. Unfortunately, he never lived to get that deed in his hand, but his wife, Grandma Charity, ended up making the final payments, and that has stayed in our family for over 100 years now. And my dad, who grew up on the land, they moved away. My grandpa, Jack, Grandma Charity had 6 children. Not only my dad farmed the land and my grandfather farmed the land, they moved away in the 30s up north to get work in the shipyards. And my dad, who was born on the land, came back and once he retired in the early 90s, and that's kind of how we got to the land. How we started our organization is once my dad returned to the land, being a novice, he naturally would go over to College Station, where Texas A&M is, especially since he was a college administrator himself. First thing thought was, hey, let me go get educated on what I need to know. And what he always noticed, what was always glaring to him, is he was always the only black guy in the room. And then when he would go to the barbershop, local barbershop where all the black guys were, they'd be snickering, saying, hey, there's the guy from north who's hanging out with the white guys. So he figured, hey, if these guys aren't going to go get the information they need, I'm going to bring it to him. And he and my mom, who really is the engine who makes our organization go for the past 25 years, started the Texas Small Farmers Ranchers community-based organization.
And I just want to say that story you told about your great-grandfather, Grandpa Jack, and basically the attempt to steal the land from him or make him pay for it twice is unfortunately all too common a situation in the United States, and a lot of people have lost their land that way. It's kind of amazing that your family held on to it.
Yeah, absolutely. We are one of the blessed ones. If you go to our website, you'll see we have a learning library, and one of the things we touch on quite a bit is land laws and just education on ways and means to hold on to the land. And yes, we are definitely one of the blessed ones over the years who, through certain types of systemic racism have been able to hold on to the land, and we don't take that lightly. At least we try not to. Some family is family, so there are those in there who take it lightly, but most of us don't.
Right. We did a show a while back with an attorney named Jillian Hinshaw, and I'll link to that in the show notes, who has done a lot of work helping African-American folks with holding on to property, heirs property in particular, and there's a lot of need for attorneys to do that kind of work. But let's talk about farming. There aren't a lot of Black farmers who are making their living off of farming. Why is that?
There's probably a number of, there's many layers to that, the answer to that question, but it really boils down to, the fact that historically Black farmers, face numerous challenges, that go right back to, systemic racism. Things such as lending practices. If you look at some of the recent stats, it'll show you that, that out of, about 18 to 20,000 white farmers who applied for farm loans, only about about 50% of them were turned away, a little bit over 50%. You take that number with Black farmers, which is a much smaller sample size. I think it's under 1,000. I think it was like 900. And I think the stat was 2022. Less than 900 who applied nationally. And out of that small sample size, only 9% were approved for loans and lending. And as anyone who farms, who really farms commercially understands that farming is a heavily capitalized, operation. You got to have cash flow. So that's number one. We just talked about another one, land retention. And, without being able to monetize your land through farming, how are you going to pay for those taxes? Matter of fact, how are you going to get the agricultural tax exemption that many other farmers observe? Access to land, for new farmers, how are they going to the up and coming generations? And I know that applies across the board. That's not really a race thing, but it definitely is a glaring thing when you were talking to the Black community. Based on everything else we shared, there's also barriers as far as gaining technical assistance and culturally competent knowledge. And there's, adding on to all that, the countless barriers that they are to, even if you get that far, getting your product to the market and having, sustainable success. And there's so many stories that, we can get into about being able to jump through all those hoops and overcome all those things I just shared, only to have the door shut in your face because of the color of your skin when it comes to being able to sell your product. So there's tons and tons of barriers that sometimes people call it complaining. So I'm hesitant on these type of platforms of going too far down that road. I always like to get into some of the things I like to believe are good solutions, but definitely there are some challenges that lead to it, not to mention just the sheer cost of farming these days when it comes to, at least over the last 70 years when it says basically go big or go home, that basically meant to a Black farmer, hey, this isn't for you. And I've literally had some guys actually say that in my face that, hey, this is not a Black man's game.
Well, you had the door literally shut in your face one day when you had an appointment to show up to sell your cattle and they took one look at you. What happened?
Yeah. So the story behind that is that there was a program called the Local Food Production or something. It's called the LFPA. That's through the USDA, a program that was administered through the USDA. Here in Texas, it went through Texas Department of Agriculture, and then it went to the food banks, basically. So I think it was administered by different counties, but it all basically was the same pot of money just going through different counties. Well, one county reached out and they wanted to do meat purchasing from us. That's what the P stands for, local food purchasing. Anyway, they reached out and said, hey, we want to make sure that we involve Black farmers in this. And we said, great. But knowing in the back of our mind the history that goes along with it, we did not, and how fragile the situation is with our farmers already who have already taken so many hits, mentally. We wanted to make sure that we were the first guinea pig. So my dad, getting up in age, he's in his mid 80s now, and he's really the cattleman of our family. But we had already decided that we were going to reduce our herd greatly just to make sure that he wasn't out there chasing around cows, too many. He just was at an age he couldn't do it. So we said, hey, why don't you use our herd? We got about 40 head that we're probably going to cull out. So let's go ahead and run our herd down to the cattle meat processor of your choice. So he reaches out to a local meat processor that's pretty well known in the Texas area. And the guy says, oh, yeah, no problem. Just have your guys come down and we'll meet them next week. So we show up, and as we're pulling up, the guy from the food bank who invited us is pulling up. And as we meet in the office at the same time, and the meat processing guy takes one look at us, it says not to us, but to the food bank guy, he says, oh, we're booked out, for another year. Sorry about that. And so the food bank guy literally fainted. I mean, he turned beet red and just he could not believe it. And probably the saddest part about it is our reaction. We pretty much knew that it was par for the course, and we're pretty much prepared for what had happened already ahead of time. Anything else we considered a bonus. And that's a sad narrative, but we're glad we did it, because the worst thing that could have happened is we sent one of our farmers that way. And they experienced that, and guess what? They go back and tell the rest of the people they know, and we never are able to feed into those farmers again because of the lack of trust that already exists.
And that really points out the psychological component to the work that you're doing. It's so important because there's so many people who are traumatized who really might not have enough trust to participate in the first place, but then when they do, it's really important to give them what you call small wins.
Yeah, absolutely. People don't understand most people don't understand how much weight the mental and emotional side of things are. And one thing that I've learned in this role is that the mental and emotional side can quickly derail any logic that's out there. So you have a farmer that you've been feeding into and giving technical assistance who's of color, they're already walking in the door with the doubts and the negative self-talk, that says, is this really for me? Will this thing work out? What dangers lie ahead that I don't even see coming if I keep doing what I'm doing? Those are things that are going through these farmers' minds that are real things that most people, who don't wear black skin every day of their lives don't understand. And a lot of times the worst part of it is we don't even realize that we're carrying this stuff around, which just becomes a normal part of who we are. So in those situations, just like you said, creating those small wins means everything. It may not make any sense to anybody outside the Black race, but to a guy like myself who really understands these things that I'm sharing with you and how much weight they hold and how fragile the situation is that we keep that in front of us every step of the way. I think one of the biggest challenges for really the non-Black organizations that we collaborate with is, even though they really truly want to empathize, they can't really relate to the deeply embedded mental side of what I just shared with you. So what happens is, in many cases, they lose patience. In their mind, hey, we've done A, B, C, and D. That should result in X, Y, and Z. And I have to explain to them, no, it doesn't work that way with this group of people who have been historically traumatized. There's a whole nother layer you have to get to. And guess what? All of it can be years and years. It can be derailed because of the lifetime of traumatization that they've experienced. And that's so important for other organizations to understand. It's great that you're doing a, racial diversity training and this and that, but understand that that person who is wearing that other skin over there, just based on nobody's fault. It is what it is, but it's real. There's real traumatic things, and it's at different levels. I'm able to endure some things that the next person may not, just based on their personality and their life experience and so on and so forth. But it's really important to understand that it's there. I mean, the other day I had my wife, we were in the store, and she asked me to, grab an avocado. I think it was an avocado. And there was a white woman standing there. She's like, oh, just reach over there. And even my wife, being a Black woman, as a Black man, I had to explain to her, no, I can't do that. I can't just reach over her and grab that avocado because that could be seen a certain way. And most people don't have to worry about that. They just do it. If you go into the grocery store, Mary Charlotte, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure you probably would go ahead and have just reached over and put it in your cart and moved on. As a Black man, as a 6'4", 250-pound Black man, I have to be concerned about those things for real because of past history and what that says.
Yeah. One thing that's, I think, really important for people to understand is, there's a lot of attention now and money being put into diversity and equity and inclusion. And when you and I were talking the other day, you said that it's really important that the people who are spending that money are doing it, really giving the leadership to the people on the ground who understand the problems in the first place. Like, what does that look like on the difficult side and on the good side? Like in agriculture, how would you spend money on diversity, inclusion, and equity in a way that really benefits your community?
I would first and foremost take some time to find out where the gaps really lay and the barriers are. So often we work with, other organizations who, as we're trying, let's say we're in the pre-funding stage, everybody's in agreement on what needs to happen. But more often than not, once that money shows up or the funding shows up or is awarded, things change because you quickly find out who is really serious about understanding, seeking to first understand, before they take those steps, and that goes for any industry or anything you do. You've got to kind of take a step back and take inventory of where the barriers are. I think that's the biggest thing. There's so many, I see so often bigger organizations who have the resources to get and the expertise to get these grants that many of the people on the ground floor who are doing the heavy lifting may not have. That's okay to me, as long as you're willing, those bigger organizations are willing to really invest in the folks who are really doing the work and partner with them and seek to understand, and don't get impatient because of some of the things I just shared with you before, but really seek to understand and lower the bar. As you said earlier, many of these farmers need to see some wins. They do understand that they do have imposter syndrome walking in the door, and they do have trust issues, whatever level that may be, and let them see some wins. And the other part is to what we learned is that we have to invest in the early adapters. You get somebody that you can see is really invested into learning, even though they may be fearful, they're willing to overcome that fear. Lean into that person and really invest in them, because what's behind that person, that farmer of color, is 2, 3, 4, 50, 100 other farmers who are waiting to see if it's real. Can they trust it? And is it sustainable? And then they're going to join in. And that's how we rebuild confidence. And that's how we move this needle, versus doing some of the stuff like what happened to me at the meat processing place. That's a huge setback. If that wasn't, my dad and I there, that would have been a huge setback, and it happens every day. And then we wonder, how come we don't see those people? We'll never see them again. And worse yet, they're going back telling other people that they're close to in their community the negative experience they had. We have to figure out a way to reverse that with organizations that really, truly understand the community that we're trying to serve and have the heart to serve the people.
And as you say, some people really get that, and other people, they're kind of more there for the photo op.
Yeah. There's plenty who are there for the photo op. There are, let's be honest, there's a lot of funding out here right now in the, diversity and equity lane. There just is. And, if you can put a black face on that, oh my goodness, that's a pretty good look for you, and I don't mind that at all, as long as you're willing to put in the work and really truly have a heart to move the needle. If not, please, stay out of that lane so the people who really need to be served can really truly be served. Because, like it or not, Washington, D.C., when that money leaves Washington, D.C., it's very difficult for those from Washington, D.C. to police how that money is being used. And it's very easy to fill out a report and say you did X, Y, and Z, and then you're set up, for the next set of funding when it comes around. Meanwhile, the little guys here who need the resources, who probably, you should be reaching out. Some of these organizations should be reaching out to see how they can help them out. That phone call never comes, and we just keep bootstrapping and doing the work that we need. Again, this is not a cry to say, hey, come help me out. It's to say, hey, if you're not really going to lean into assisting, the people that this money is earmarked for, please step out the way so it can be used properly.
Right. So you are a soil scientist, and you are promoting regenerative agriculture as a path forward for Black farmers. Why regenerative?
Good question. So I'm pretty sure this is not a Black thing. This is probably a universal thing from farmers. The transition and the existing divide from the conventional farming practices that have been used over the last 70 years to natural farming, whether that be, organic. A lot of the farmers we work in Texas, especially the Black farmers, don't really they don't take to the word organic for whatever reason. So we use regenerative agriculture. But whatever that looks like, there is some pushback, at least there was early on, and that happened, directly within my family. And so being kind of caught in the middle of that, we had a cow-calf operation, and we also became some pretty well-known grass farmers in the valley we live in. So and when my dad's health started going down, we started doing some transitioning, and we moved off some land, some acreage that we had been leasing from I think 2 other Black families in our area, in our county. We were actually leasing some land from them. We decided, since we needed to downsize some due to my dad's health, that we'd move our operation completely back to our family land, which had not been touched by any chemicals for as long as we can remember. So with that said, there was some divide within our family farm operation on how we should move forward. And so that led me to start attending different conferences, across, such as, the no-till conference that, happens. And there's some other ones that I attended to really just understand, because my teeth were cut on the conventional side of it when it came into farming. But I also, started seeing a lot of the conversion and the divide. So just research, just being the curious person I am, I started to really jump into it. And I started noticing each year that I would go to some of these regenerative ag conferences, there would be more and more and more farmers showing up. And one way or another, I think a colleague of mine said, hey, you should probably take one of these courses. They sent me something for the Soil Food Web. Dr. Elaine Ingham, who actually is out of, I think, Colorado State, Texas A&M, and Oregon State. And believe it or not, Oregon State is my alma mater. That's where I graduated from. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll just take this course. And it really took me down a road of truly understanding the importance of biology and understanding the world beneath our feet first, and farming from the soil up, which is not how I learned to farm. My mindset was always looking at what was happening on top of the ground, with very little, concern about what was going on underneath the ground, besides, doing some kind of conventional soil testing, which is basically focusing on what nutrients are in the soil so you can put more synthetic chemicals in it. So that was really how I got into it, was just through family conflict and saying, hey, I'm the type of guy who, hey, instead of let's fighting about it, let's figure out how we can make this thing work. And that's kind of how I stumbled into it.
And one of the things about it is that there are fewer barriers to entry for Black farmers because there are fewer inputs, if any, and chemicals. So that makes their costs lower up front.
Absolutely. So that's the thing that, that's kind of the little nugget that, if you want to call it, that I try to use with our farmers, is like, hey guys, believe it or not, whether you realize it, you're already halfway there. I'm going to conferences where farmers have, hundreds of thousands of acres that they have to figure out how to pivot their operations on. And not only are you on the sidelines, similar to how our ranch was when we moved away and were losing other property, when we came back to it, it was literally untouched, where we did not feel like we had to, detoxify the soil. Sure, the soil was not in the greatest of shape, but it gave us an opportunity to build on it and really start small. That's the other thing that we really share with our farmers is, hey, you're already on the sideline. You're already on the outside looking in. Use this as an opportunity to learn this through trials in small spaces, and then grow, as you learn what really works in this regenerative framework on your own farm.
And so what does that look like? What are some examples of farmers in your organization who really are starting small?
What that looks like is maybe let's say they have 50 acres, which is not unusual for a Black farmer. Most of our farmers have anywhere from 10 to 200 acres, but most commonly right around 50 or so. What we try to do is encourage them to designate maybe an acre or in half an acre. And depending on what they want to grow, if they're looking to grow hay or they're looking to do livestock, then we teach them those principles about how to do rotational grazing and some of the different tools, including rest, how to rest, this paddock of your land, but at the same time, how to integrate things such as solar energy, such as diversification instead of monoculture. A lot of our farmers have been trained that, hey, if it's not just one type of grass or one type of produce, then guess what? You're farming ugly. And we're trying to teach them that no, you get some ground cover on it and you let it grow, and you let it rest, and then you put the animals on it, let them poop on it, and how to use that poop. So do what you've already done, but do it with what we call whole farm resource management. And how to farm with the shovel first before you start, jump on that tractor.
I'm always struck by the fact that the aesthetic component is really part of this, like changing your aesthetic from the kind of neat rows of monoculture to really seeing the beauty in those polycultures and cover crops of all different species and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a definite paradigm shift, especially for the older seasoned farmers. It just is. It's tough to spend a lifetime. I'm even seeing it with some of the extension office guys who hold the title of soil specialists. But really, they've learned it the way I learned, and it's a tough mental shift because again, it's a badge of honor for many of those guys to have a pesticide certification. That was a big thing 10 years ago. So now you're telling me that I should allow this thing that I'm calling a weed to grow next to the beautiful, hybrid grass that I just planted? Are you kidding me? And when they learn that thing that they're calling the weed probably has 10 times more nutrients in it, it's just a hard, tough thing to swallow because it goes against everything that have been taught and learned.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the several paradigm shifts that goes along with regenerative agriculture. And even when you learn that, building your soil really is building your wealth, because if you grow more grass, you can feed more animals and have more carrying capacity and all that, or same with crops. But then there's still other things that you need. I mean, you can reduce input costs and you can build your soil, but then you still need infrastructure and access to markets. What are you seeing? What are you looking at there?
So what we're looking at, I'll tell you from a high level. I don't want to get too deep into specifics because what I've already learned in my 5 years as a chief executive is that not everybody who says they're for you are for you. So I'm gonna answer this question on a high level, but I think one of the things that we are trying to do as an organization is to create on-ramps into the market, to wholesale markets, I should say. And we're trying to do that by talking to organizations who are some of the larger organizations out there and teaching them how they can use their diversity dollars to really serve, this group of underserved farmers to really put them back in the game. So we're asking them to forego many of the quotas. We understand that there's such things as food safety and all of that, that just has to be part of the equation. And we're not asking that, but certain things, such as how many pounds, the amount of volume that you're able to commit to, and things like that. What we're trying to do is take a group approach so we can kind of forego those things, create some sustainable wins that we can point to, that individual farmers can point to, and then come back. And what they're going to do is share that information and those victories as well as we are, which speaks way more volume than we ever can by just trying to pull someone's arm to say, hey, come along with us. And we, because of some of the past history. The other thing that we're doing, so not only are we trying to create on-ramps to turnkey wholesale markets, and the reason we're going wholesale, just to take a step back, we're focusing on wholesale right now is because, most of these farmers work day jobs, because of necessity. They're on the outside looking in, and they don't really have the time, energy, resources to make selling at some of the direct ways that you sell, like sitting at a farmer's market, as profitable. Not to say that's a bad thing, not to say that that's not something they can do, not to say that we don't encourage many of our farmers to start off in that role. What we're trying, but it's really just to say this is what we're doing, some of the things we're doing to create wins. The other thing, to answer your question, is that now that we have those turnkeys and we're feeding into kind of the early adapters and making sure that they see some wins, we're also, as we just talked about, are creating ongoing continuing education on whole farm resource and regenerative ag practices, especially when it comes to such things as water, because that's a big, huge expense that we haven't talked about. But if we can turn your soil, if we can utilize some of the natural things that are free, such as rainfall, and you capture that rain by rebuilding strong soil that's got built-in filters that are built to regenerate and do your farming for you underneath our feet. As you get your wins 3, 4, 5 years from now we've created a situation where the next generation of Black farmers have the confidence to come in and build wealth that they've been previously denied.
One of the things that you're promoting is so-called specialty crops, which I always think is weird because basically it means produce and a lot of the stuff that's actually good for you. What is needed to make that work? What do you see as the potential there?
The potential with specialty crops, I like to call it a blue ocean in Texas. And the reason I call it a blue ocean is because we're in Texas and we like everything big, livestock, we like to talk about our wheat fields and our cotton fields. Those are big things. As I shared with you, some people who are not for you aren't shy about telling you, that you're out of place. Right now, as we speak, there's not a lot of those same guys who are running in the specialty crop lane because it's simply not known to be a moneymaker. But at the end of the day, it's all about the soil when you're talking about farming, and we keep talking on-ramps and getting back in the game. So that's an opportunity for our farmers to get back in the game and give them an incentive to rebuild soils. And then that's why, again, a reason why we're going the wholesale route versus the direct market route is because we've also asked some of these folks to pay a nice premium for the work that these farmers are doing to get them back in the game. So again, I'm trying to talk, if you can't tell, in code, so I'm not giving too much of the game plan away, but that is the thinking behind specialty crop, is that it is a blue ocean that's not saturated, an industry that's not saturated by a bunch of the guys who can't systemically cut your water off the way ours was cut off at that meat processing place.
Right, right. And ladies and gentlemen, I had to look this up. Blue ocean and red ocean. Red ocean is like established big markets, whereas blue ocean is kind of like new markets and finding new customers and new opportunities. Did I get that more or less right?
Yeah, you got that right. It's not often. I'm not known for my vocabulary, so it's not often that I'm saying words and phrases that the masses don't know. So I'm patting myself on the back right now.
So let's talk about COVID. I mean, that was a huge change, and that was the moment where people saw that the food system is built on a kind of house of cards and that supply chains can be broken so easily. What was the effect of COVID on Black communities and how they saw farming and growing food?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny because when COVID hit, I was getting calls from all different sources of media, asking me the question, now how's this impacting Black farmers? And I'm going, okay, you're asking the wrong question because we're already on the sidelines. So, but one thing about COVID was that, especially in Black communities where typically a Black farm family is going to lose, that next generation to the urban areas because they've seen their parents, struggle. So it's just not attractive to them. What we're seeing now is many of those same folks who've moved to the city and didn't want anything to do with the farm. And what COVID did, it made them realize, wait a minute, there could come a day when I just can't walk to my refrigerator and get the food that I need to survive. So I think COVID opened a lot of people's eyes to that, especially many people in the Black community who may come from farming families, or maybe they don't. Many of the folks that we're finding who are now, jumping into the urban gardening craze, started that during the pandemic, because they had extra time on their hands and they noticed that there was limitations put on what they could buy, at the grocery store because of the supply chain issue. So there was a combination of things that really brought attention to food and the importance of food in our supply chain within the Black community. So much so that we even had, some pro athletes who were reaching out to us to find out how they can get involved. So we actually were able to reach a whole new clientele, because the other part of the COVID pandemic, as it pertains to our organization, is that we did a lot of our secret sauce was convening in person, which was great. But with Texas being so large, that was putting a lot of strain on our organization. So here comes COVID, and our farmers, which mostly are older farmers at that time, 50, 60 plus, a lot of them didn't jump on, they didn't know how to use a mouse on a computer. So it was tough getting them to jump on a Zoom call. However, when COVID came, they had no choice. So we were basically able to go back to them and say, hey, if you can't get on a Zoom call, then ask your little niece or nephew, because they probably know, at 4 years old how to do it, but we need you to do that. So that kind of changed the game a little bit too for our organization. So there were some, although the pandemic was a tough time, there were some positive things that came out of it for our organization.
Well, and people they're doing more urban gardening, and they're also really looking at food as medicine, food as nutrition, yes, food as a way to stay healthy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you look at some of the statistics in many of the urban areas under, food sovereignty, the umbrella of food sovereignty, you'll hear the word food deserts, and whether you like that word or not, really what it's saying is that basically that means you can drive for blocks and blocks and blocks and not find a grocery store with fresh food, where a person has access to fresh food. So what do you do when you've worked a 10-hour workday and you're tired and you make it at home? You're going to probably just go to the corner store that's probably doesn't have any fresh produce, but it's serving you something that you're calling food. So you're putting that in your body, and you get in the habit of doing that 5-6 times a week. Then where does that show up? It shows up on your health bill. It shows up when you're going to the doctor or at the pharmaceutical. So it's a vicious cycle that many in urban communities are again starting to really come to light on, and really they want to do something. They're really understanding it, many of which who are taking care or being caretakers of parents or loved ones who are literally dependent on these pharmaceuticals now because of what their bodies have gone through for the last 10 to 20 years. So yes, absolutely is a big part of the resurgence in the food movement that you're seeing in urban areas.
Tell us a little bit about your own farm. What are you growing there? Is it a farm where you're like, is it like a teaching and learning farm? Are you bringing people to it? Are you selling livestock? What's going on?
Yeah, so it's kind of in transition. We went, like I said earlier, we went through a period of moving back once my dad's health started going downhill, and we just trying to refigure or recoup who we really were, especially with my family, the family dynamics, the situation with regenerative ag versus conventional farming. So where we're at right now is where we're kind of a learning farm. We've been working with organizations where we bring, development disabled children and their families all across Texas. We bring them out to the farm. It's always cool to talk to the parents because the first thing they say is, "Oh my God, they're actually putting their cell phones down and putting their hands in the dirt." So we work with Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Boys and Girls Club, community centers across the state of Texas, a lot in the Brazos County area, but that's one thing that we do. We've got some wild horses out there, some chickens. We've got some sheep. We had some Brangus cattle, but we ended up selling all those off. But we'll probably get a new herd out there within the next 6 months or so. We've got a high tunnel. We've got pasture. We've got garden area. We're working on a pollinator garden now. We do a little. We got a kind of a, what do you call it, cabin. And so that we use to do presentations and also some water harvesting. So off of the cabin and also the high tunnel. So there's some things, and then the wildlife and forestry. So we've got like one of those little gators that we take folks to the back 40 on if we really want, because we got a little river creek that if on the other side of our ranch. So those are some of the things that we're doing. We do want to continue to be an example to the other farmers. So that's what we're probably going to designate maybe 20, 30 acres of our 120 acre farms and just use that to demonstrate some of what we just talked about, some of the rotational grazing and some of the holistic and regenerative ag practices, whether you are an urban gardener or whether you are, a rural or like raising livestock or hay or whatever farmer. Whatever it looks like, the principles remain the same. And that's what we don't just want to tell them. We understand, especially for farmers, the importance of showing them and then them taking that back and implementing what they know immediately on their place and see how it works for them. Because no matter what you show a farmer, they've got to figure it out for their own selves on their own place.
Right. You're serving the state of Texas, which is a big state. Are there comparable organizations in other states, like sister organizations that you have communication with?
Yeah, so we do. So we're in really East Central Texas, which is where the largest population, Black population is. So we do geographically, if you start down in San Antonio, our area would be up to Oklahoma and over to Louisiana state lines and everything in between. There are some outliers to that, but that's pretty much our area. We also have partners up in Oklahoma that we're working with. We have partners in Louisiana, Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia. I just got introduced to a few farmers in the Carolinas. And just today, just got introduced to an organization out of Kentucky that's doing some similar stuff that we aim to do. So it's always good to have those organizations. I didn't give their names because I don't want to leave anybody out, but it's always good to have those partner organizations who are peer, we can kind of match notes and mastermind, which is part of the deal as well, is to find out what other people are doing that are working, and so we can, see if that works on our end and implement more of it. and share what we're doing that's working with them as well, so we can move this needle together.
And I think, and it may be obvious to say this, but I think it's just worth saying aloud that this is very much part of the civil rights movement in a fundamental way.
Absolutely. I think out of the civil rights movement, there were some absolutely great things that happened. One of the downsides that came with segregation is that for the Black community, we stopped being owners, of our own operations. We pretty much put down our shovels and even our business licenses, and because we were so eager to be a part of something. And unfortunately, fast forward 50, 60 years later, and at that time we only owned, our wealth was less than 0.5%, of 1%. And fast forward to today, it's less than 0.5%, and 1% is what our wealth is in this country as Black people. So yes, those things are great. A lot of times people even want to point to the election of President Obama as being a great thing, which it absolutely was. But again, there was downside. And one of those downsides is that, many people point to that as saying, hey, that was the end of racism. You and I know that's absolutely not true, but it is a narrative that many people hold, and many have turned the page and their ears aren't open to have these kind of conversations that we're having right now.
Well, I just want to say congratulations on an amazing first 25 years of your organization, and I hope it goes on for another 25 years. If people want to support your work, what do they do? You can go to the website?
Yes. So we that's our go-to, is the website, tsfrcbo.org. If you're on there for, I think, at least 3 seconds, you'll see a pop-up with our newsletter. All it's asking for is your name and your email address. Those 2 places are where we're able to stay in touch with you, and all of our resources funnel right there. So we also have if you go to the bottom of our homepage on our website, there are some of the social media handles as well.
P. Wade Ross is Executive Director of the Texas Small Farmers and Ranchers community-based organization, and he is a soil biologist, and he'll be speaking at the Regenerate Conference in November. That's in Denver, Colorado, in the first week of November. You can find out more at regenerateconference.com. Wade, thank you so much for being with us.
Such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Down to Earth. We would love it if you would support this program, which you can do by going to patreon.com/down-to-earth planet to plate, where you can sign up for as little as $3. Patreon is Patreon. And also please rate and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. The Quivira Coalition is a not-for-profit and a community network of ranchers, farmers, conservationists, scientists, educators, and many others dedicated to regenerative practices that produce healthy food, support meaningful livelihoods, sustain biodiversity, and remedy the impacts of climate change. To learn more about Quivira and how you can support their work, visit quiviracoalition.org, Quivira. And finally, this show is a production with the Radio Cafe. You can check out radiocafe.org to hear back episodes of this show and also find all kinds of other shows on a wide variety of topics as well. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.